Today we're going to make this simple tapering jig. The basic idea is that you adjust this top piece, tighten it, you then move the bottom piece to get the angle that you want, tighten that, and now you can put your piece of wood there, use the toggle clamps to hold it in place, and you also have this little foot here that helps push it along. This back side rides against the fence for your table saw to ensure that you can repeat that same cut for multiple legs. A few months back I built a new shoe stand for just inside my front door, and I took apart the old one that I had. It was just some cheap particle board thing, but I kept that wood around just in case. I think it'll make a nice sled for this, so this can be the base, and since it has this veneer on one side, I think it should slide pretty nicely. It also has a very square edge, so that can ride against the table saw fence. If you're picking up wood specifically for this project, you can just pick up some plywood, probably 1/2 inch thick or 3/4 inch thick for this. So the first thing we're going to do is bring up the blade. We want it so the tooth is just a little bit above our wood. Now we need to ensure we only cut from here to here. So if we know our bit is about here, we can grab a stop block, make sure we have a smooth edge, line that up, clamp it in place. Now we drill all the way across. And same thing on this side. Whenever you're using your router, you want to limit how much material you're taking out. So first, we're just going to go about halfway through. So we'll bring this up very, very slowly. There we go. So now we have to be very careful as we set the board down onto the bit. We want to make sure the board is all the way against the fence and the stop block, and it comes straight down onto that bit. We can slowly move from right to left, digging in halfway through the board the first time. After we've done the other side, we can place the board next to the bit and raise it up so that we'll be able to push all the way through this time. Once it's ready to go, we do the same thing, pushing the board against the fence and against the stop block, and slowly lowering it down level. Once it's punched through, we can push from right to left again. And now we have the track that the bolt can go through. Alright, so the next thing we need to account for is the T-bolt. So we'll have one similar to this, just not as long. And we need to account for the head of that T-bolt. So the bit on the end here needs to get recessed in the wood. So we'll use a 3/4 inch router bit to clear that out. So remember, as you tighten this down, you want to pull it up just slightly. And put on the guard. Alright, so now we need to make sure that we're just taking off a tiny bit of wood, just enough to account for that head. So we're going to bring down the router bit just barely up to the wood and use the T-bolt to measure, just eyeballing it here to get it pretty close. Doesn't have to be perfect. That seems good, so we lock it in place. So I found this chunk of a 2x4 in my scrap bin, and it's pretty rough. There's some big chunks out of it, but I think if I cut it roughly in half and take off this edge, that'll make a nice fence that we can put on here to rotate. Alright, so now we need to worry about getting the bolt in place. So we need to drill a hole right here as the pivot point. So I'm just going to eyeball that where it seems decent. And with that as the pivot point, this other part will rotate. So that means the bolt down on this end, on the right, is going to need to be able to move up and down in a little slot. So I get the approximate position on one end over here, move it to the other side, and draw a little bit more of a circle, and this has to be drilled out. I have this old jig that I made and I haven't used for quite a while. So I'm going to pull the toggle clamps off of here and put them on the new one. Now that I have these toggle clamps ready, I can put them on the new piece. Luckily, it happens to be almost exactly the right size. I completely forgot to measure for the toggle clamps. But now I can go ahead and mark some holes. And that'll allow me to pre-drill into here to avoid any splitting because it's pretty close to the edge. Since I'm not actually drilling all the way through, I didn't worry about moving it off of this piece. So I'm going to try to reuse some of the screws I pulled out of the previous jig, but a few of them are stripped pretty badly, so we'll see how that goes. I've got a few washers that I'm going to use to help reinforce this. We're going to line it up. Now that we have the two toggle clamps on here, we can screw on some knobs. So you lock this top one into place. You can adjust this bottom one to whatever angle you want and lock it into place. And your wood would go right along here, clamp down. But one more thing that I recommend you do is just take a piece of scrap wood and glue it right there. So we'll do that real quickly. Stick that on there. And we'll put a clamp on there to let it dry. One of the challenges that I have with woodworking is that I get an idea like making this tapering jig, and I'll sketch out a few different ideas for how that could actually come together. Then I find one that I think I like, and I just dive right into it without thinking it all the way through. So you saw that with these toggle clamps, because I just pulled them off of another jig and I didn't really think through how wide this board needed to be to support those. I got lucky that they actually fit. The problem with putting them right up against the edge like this is you can see the part that's pushing down can push outside of this base. So that means any smaller table legs can't really work well with this jig. So I think what I'll do to modify this is on the back side here, I'm just going to add a couple of boards here and here, move these toggle clamps back so that this piece is a little closer to the support and pushes directly against the base. That should make it a lot better. All in all, this turned out really well, so thanks for watching.